Dear son, I know we won't be seeing you very much soon, and I hope you're having a great time in college. I just wanted to send you off with these words of wisdom. I would like to tell you the story of what happened to your grandfather. My father was the only one who raised me. My mother left very early. My father used to joke that she got too scared of him and left. My father was much too friendly and nice of a man for any woman to be afraid of him. He was a tall man who always used to dress very nice with his signature overcoat and hat. My dad was a fisherman, and some days when I'd see him walking home, I'd see him with a huge fish over his shoulder and the biggest grin on his face as he had caught us a large dinner. I remember always being so happy with just my father and I for a while. But I remember one day, I saw my father walking back. He did not have a signature grin, and he was hiding his eyes behind his hat. He walked past me and he said,
"Sorry, boyo. No fish today."
He said this like he had let me down as a father. The next day, my dad did not go to his work. Instead, as soon as I was out of bed, he came and got me. He took me out into the early morning already with his coat and hat on, loaded up with fishing gear. He told me that this was the day that he decided it was best to teach me the family craft. When I asked him about his work, he merely said that it was an important day for me and that he needn't go to the docks today for this. I went out at the break of dawn with my father. We went and hiked for many miles down toward the local creek, and we sat and took out his fishing rod and baited it up. And as he did, he said,
"Son, you want to know the secret of fishing?"
I nodded my head in wonder, waiting to hear the wisdom my father would bestow upon me.
It's not about the fish or the rods. It's about the company you get when you fish.
He said, as he turned and smiled at me and cast his line out, seeming content, my father and I enjoyed the early morning sunrise as we sat in silent company. After a while, I looked over to see if my father was looking at the sunrise. As I looked over, I saw him giving a look of woe to the sunrise. I wanted to ask him why he was so upset. We left that morning after not getting a single bite. We then walked back home, where my father went up to his study and began furiously writing letters, addressed to almost all of our relatives. Some we had visited often, and some I had never heard of. My father had some of the best handwriting I had ever seen. He used to work for a newspaper company. He said that he had quit because he didn't like the way things were run, and he craved a simpler life. My father then got up from his study and said,
"Amos, it'll be okay, son. I have to take care of something. You stay here."
And later that day, he did come back with not just one large fish, but several large fish. But he also came home with something else. Several bruises and scars on his face and neck. He stopped at the front door, panting, elated, and joked,
"That's all right, son. It was just a minor disagreement between coworkers."
That night I had a dream about several trains going, as if they were rolling up, as if they were far away, but I could slowly hear them getting closer. The next day, as I heard bumping around downstairs, when I walked downstairs, I saw my father at the front door, talking with neighbors. He turned and looked at me with a look almost as if he were ill. He instructed me to grab all of my stuff and pack up all of my things. He wouldn't tell me why. I rushed upstairs and began packing all my things, while I could hear my father downstairs talking amongst the neighbors. When I had finally finished packing, my father grabbed me and we walked towards the front door. I had no idea of what was happening at all. We walked out with our neighbor and said nothing as we walked. On our way, we saw several military trucks filled with people, as well as many people walking on the sides of the road. We then arrived at a train station. I saw a massed crowd around us, and I held my father's hand tightly. My father wasn't even looking at me. He just kept staring forwards, as if he was about to face his greatest fear. It was then when I heard something very faint. Then I heard it again. This time I noticed that my father had heard it too. He tried to peer past the crowd all gathered there. Then we both heard it, loud and clear. The sound of a train coming. The horn was definite, but not loud. Everyone seemed to be bustling about, but my father just sat there. He'd realized something, or was deep in thought. Each couple of seconds you could hear the train getting slightly louder. Then my father took me aside. He looked at me and told me words I still remember to this day.
Amos, don't get on that train. Okay? You run. And don't look back. You run.
His face had so much purpose to it that I was locked into every word he said. I nodded my head, and he knew I had committed the words to memory. And then he stood up and he put his hat on my head. Then I heard the train. It no longer sounded different. My father then looked at me and gave me the signal to leave. And then I tried to shove my way through the crowd. Chaos everywhere. Got shoved to the ground. Got up and began to run. I was taken in by a good Christian family. I stayed with them for the majority of the war. As soon as I heard that the camps were free, I went down to the nearest one, the one my father went to. When I got there, all I found was my neighbor. He told me my father died in his sleep after several months in the camps. He said that the Nazis could never break my father's spirits. I had heard what had happened to many people in the camps. Then I remembered what my father had told me. It's not about the fish or the rods. It's about the company you're with. That's the philosophy my father had used to survive, to make it through his life.